And the oath is either by Bible, Quran, or the Holy Book of the Hindus, depending on your religion. Which one do you prefer?
The Bible.
So take the Bible in your right hand, raise it, and recite the oath that the sergeant will show you.
I, Kinyanjui, do swear that the evidence I shall give before this committee on the matters under its consideration shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you. You may take your seat and sign to the oath. This is a committee on appointments. Good. If you have your original documents, you can give to the sergeant to pass on to the clerk to cross-check with what we have in our possession on you. Thank you, Honorable Lee. This is a committee of the National Assembly on appointments. It's chaired by yours truly as Speaker of the National Assembly. I'll invite honorable members to introduce themselves, starting with the Deputy Speaker on my right.
I'm Gladys Boss, member for Wasingishu County and also Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. Welcome.
Kimani Shongwa, MP Kikuyu, Leader of Majority.
Junaid Mohammed, MP Sona East, Leader of Minority.
Kosing David, MP Poko South, this committee.
Nelson Koech, Member of Parliament, Belgood constituency.
Gikaria David, Nakuru Town is constituency. And Honorable Chairman, I just want to declare my interest on the nominee before the committee. He is from Nakuru County and specifically votes in Nakuru Town, his constituency. So he's my constituent. Again, as you had said earlier, that will not hinder me from any prejudice or favorism. So we will do our work as a committee member. Thank you, Chairman.
Naisula Lesuda, MP Samburu West.
Robert Mbui, MP Kadhiani, Deputy Leader of the Minority Party.
Owen Baya, MP Kilifi North and Deputy Majority Leader.
George Gitonga Murugara, Member of Parliament, Tharaka Constituency, Tharaka Nithi.
I'm Ferdinand Wanyonyi, Member of Parliament, Kwanza and Trans Nzoia County, member of this committee.
Abdul Rahim Daoud, MP for Nordimenti, Meru County.
Masemeri, MP Teso South, member of this committee.
Rehab Mukami, County MP Nyeri, member of this committee.
Stephen Mule, MP Matungulu, Machakos County, a member of this committee.
Mr. Speaker, I am leading a team of 23 dedicated officers who are serving this committee today. My name is Samuel Jiroga, I'm a clerk to the National Assembly.
Thank you. Honorable Kinyanjui, as you are aware, you've been nominated by His Excellency the President and placed before this committee to assess your suitability to hold the office to which you have been nominated. So we will ask you questions, and it will be your duty to answer them as precisely and concisely as you can. Don't engage into any arguments with any member. Even if the question is provocative, just answer the question. Leave the judgment to us. You also address the committee through the chairman of the committee. Don't have personal engagement with members, even if it is Honorable Gikaria who accelerated your departure from your last office.
Honorable Speaker, that is not true.
It's common knowledge. Gikaria, you want to deny what is obvious? It's with a light touch, but you know where the facts lie. So we'll start by inviting you, Honorable Kinyanjui. I also declare, I know Lee very well. We were in Parliament together, and we have been good friends. That notwithstanding, we will ask you every question that is relevant to establish your suitability or otherwise to hold this office. Start by, in 5 minutes or less, telling us your name, your educational background, your professional background, your work experience, any key competences in your life that make you feel and believe you are suitable for the role as Cabinet Secretary in the portfolio to which you have been nominated. Before you start, I invite Honorable Mishimbogo to go on record by introducing herself.
My apology, Honorable Chairman, I was praying. My name is Honorable Mishimboko, MP for Likoni, Mombasa County.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Allow me to take this opportunity first to express my gratitude for the opportunity to serve my country, or to be nominated to serve my country by the President. And I really want to say that I take this as a very solemn moment. We don't always get time to serve our country. So I come here in that context, and also wish to confirm that you have conferred me the title of CBS. I hold no such title. So thank you for that. Quickly going to myself, I want to say I'm a graduate of Kenyatta University, and I studied education, English and literature. I'm therefore a proud graduate of one of our local universities, and I say through my experience in Kenyatta University, I have come to see the value of education, especially education in our universities that prepared us to meet and conquer the whole world. So I think that's about my study at the university. When I got to work, I have not worked for government for long. I taught briefly and then went to the corporate sector, where I worked in the oil industry before venturing into private business. In the year 2006, I vied in a by-election in Nakuru. I did not succeed, but the following year, which was a general election, I vied, succeeded, and was elected Member of Parliament for Nakuru Town. Then included East and West was one constituency. Further, in the Grand Coalition government, I was appointed the Assistant Minister for Roads, and I worked with the late Kones, Kipkalia Kones, and later with Franklin Bett and PS Michael Kamau, and together we worked very closely with the then President Mwai Kibaki in delivering the roads agenda that remains a huge legacy to date. During my time at the ministry, I attended many postgraduate trainings, including in PPPs, transport management, privatization and outsourcing, procurement, and many other areas relating to the docket that we are working. Mr. Chairman, allow me also to say that during our tenure, we undertook some of the biggest infrastructure projects that are seen to date, one of them being the Thika Road. Second one are the eastern bypasses that we see here today, and the others include the major road network connecting us to the neighboring countries, including Isiolo, Merile, going all the way to connect to Ethiopia. And I think the important part, Mr. Speaker, is that when I worked under the Ministry of Roads, we were actually looking at this docket from an infrastructure point of view. How do we connect with Uganda, infrastructure-wise? How do we connect with Tanzania, with Ethiopia, and all these countries, and ensuring that there's smooth flow of goods and that our manufacturers have access to all those big markets, many of which do not have the advantage of manufacturing as we do have. Allow me, Mr. Chairman, to say that after I left Parliament, I was appointed the Chairman of the National Transport and Safety Authority, again within the broader sector of transport, where we undertook serious reforms, not just in safety, but in reforming the public transport sector. Noting that one of the biggest challenges we had then was congestion, especially in the urban areas, including Nairobi, and the need to encourage people to use public transport so that we can reduce the time wasted on the road because of congestion. And I'm happy much of that has borne fruit. The digitization, including the smart driving license, including other measures we brought during that time, remain alive to date, and I'm very proud of our time then. Mr. Chair, allow me also to comment that in the year 2017, I vied for Governor Nakuru, and we succeeded. And between the year 2017 and 2022, we were Governor Nakuru together with many others. I was not alone, including my deputy, Dr. Eric Korir. But I think what is most significant is that we made our contribution, and I'm happy to note that Nakuru was voted best in healthcare in 2 consecutive years. We also had our town, Nakuru, elevated into a city in the year 2021. And in the same year, I was voted the most business-friendly governor in Africa. And we take pride in some of this because they inform why we are also seated here today. Between the year 2022 to date, I retreated to my private business and had the opportunity to experience the country from the other side. And I say that because it is also important that when we discuss public policy, we also discuss it from where the public sees it. And I also had the opportunity to see how red tape affects business, how the cost of energy can hinder growth, and how taxation can impact businesses and hinder growth also. I also had experiences on how pending bills can bring businesses down, can impact on growth, and also how the management or mismanagement of politics can affect business across the country. So, Mr. Speaker, I say that I have sat both in Parliament, I've sat in the executive, I've also been at the county, and I've also sat on the Mwananchi bench, and therefore, coming into this conversation, we will be ready to work from all angles. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll invite the Deputy Speaker to be the first to ask a question.
Okay. Honorable Kinyanjui, I just have 3 related questions. One is that, as you know, in the past 10 years, the manufacturing sector in Kenya has remained stagnant at 11% of our GDP. If approved, what measures will you put in place to promote the growth of the local manufacturing sector? Also, there is the challenge of the influx of substandard counterfeit through various border points, and this has reduced also the market share of locally manufactured goods. Again, I'd like to know the strategies that you'd put in place to curb that. Also, scrap metal industry in Kenya meets a huge demand in both the local and international markets, and it contributes to about 0.6% of Kenya's exports. If approved, what policies will you implement to ensure that this trade grows, but also strike a balance with safeguarding against vandalism? Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Allow me to start by looking at the question of manufacturing in the lens of the sessional paper number 10 by the then Minister for Commerce, Dr. Gikonyo Kiano, in 1963, and the plan to make Kenya an industrial hub, encourage Africanization, and more importantly, protect our markets from external flooding by the developed and industrialized nations. But, Mr. Chairman, I want to confirm that in spite of that great dream, not much of it has been achieved. It is true that the contribution of manufacturing to GDP is in the range of about 7%, which remains low even compared to some of our neighbors within the broader Africa region. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, it will be important for us as we get into this critical office to look at the foundational causes of why manufacturing has remained low. And I want to start by saying the first one, I think, is our mindset. And I say this with the full knowledge that very few of our students will go to school in the hope of owning an industry one day. They can dream of anything else, but industry is not one of those things we have taught our people to imagine or think they would ever want to get into. So therefore, it will be important, first of all, to try and work on the psychology of our people to make them understand that where the money is not in the primary extraction, but in the value addition that we find in industry. Secondly, the issue and the cost of energy remains a big issue. We have the cost of energy being among the fourth most expensive in the whole of Africa. And therefore, if you are producing to go and compete with other products from other parts of Africa, leave alone even other parts of the world, then we are already disadvantaged. Yet we know industries are heavy consumers of energy. We need to work closely together with the Ministry of Energy to find ways of reducing the costs. But I think more importantly, Mr. Chair, is to look at the elephant in the room, which is basically energy agreements that were signed a long time ago that continue to put our energy at extremely irrational levels, thereby making manufacturing in Kenya very difficult. We are aware that there are some companies that have moved to other countries where the cost of energy is lower, and therefore I don't think it is a matter that we would want to postpone, because it's very urgent. And most of the young people whom we see out there who are restless, most of them have done courses that would be absorbed in these industries. So as long as the industries are not growing at the level that we would want, then we are likely to continue experiencing this. Then lastly, our trade agreements and other engagements with partners, which means that through the EAC, through other multilateral agreements, sometimes we have ended up getting the last side of the agreement, meaning therefore we don't protect our industries. There's flooding, and that has been a major challenge that has seen most of our industries wiped out. Allow me also to say, closely related to this, is that we have not been able to come to the aid of our factories and industries when they're in problems. And therefore you find that some of them go through foreclosure and others. Yet there are many other situations across the world when companies are facing financial constraints, including GM in the US in the year 2008. The government came and saved them. Today it remains a very big company to date. But you have had some of our bright companies, whenever they fall into trouble, they go into foreclosure, and it becomes very difficult to revive them in future. Therefore, I also want to take this opportunity to ask the House to consider how we can be able to protect our industries, because once they go down, coming up is impossible. And a good example is Kenatco, which is over 20 years into receivership. Allow me to mention also on the issue of counterfeits. Yes, it is true that a lot of the manufacturers face the serious problem of having other people manufacture using their brands without their knowledge, and therefore diluting the investment of the original investors. I think there is an already existing authority that takes care of this, and I think our work will be to work together with other state agencies, including enforcement, to ensure that it does not continue to affect our industries adversely. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, is the issue of scrap metal and how we can ensure that our exports are supported. I want to say that any country that exports scrap metal should really reconsider its policies. How can you export scrap metal instead of just melting it and making it, iron bars for construction and all that? So the idea of exporting scrap metal is a suicide note for a country that seeks to industrialize itself. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Majority.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And may also note, Honourable Speaker, that I've known Honourable Kinyanjui for quite some time, since he was a member of Parliament, and he's been a friend. That will not deter me from vetting him. And CS nominee, I want to know, from where I sit, we see a lot of disharmony or there being lack of harmonization of what is seen to be government policy in the Ministry, especially of Industry, and what happens in practice. And because we seem to be having a protectionist policy in the ministry, especially around local manufacturers. And I have in mind the specific case of the steel and cement industries, where policy has been seen to be protecting local manufacturers, those who have invested heavily in the industry. But at the same time, in practice, the ministry also proposes certain other legislative measures that negate the policies that you espouse. What do you intend to do, should you be approved, to harmonize both policy and legislation? And I say that because specifically on cement and steel, for instance, we want to encourage the growth of local industry in the steel sector with heavy investments by particular players in the country. But legislation then comes to Parliament that in a way is also killing small industrialists. And you find that you are protecting the very big industrial setups, but also killing cottage industries. Look at the people who are smelting the scrap metal you're talking about, and those who are processing iron ore to steel. Look at those who are manufacturing mabati, iron sheets, and wire rods. And the legislation around it and what the ministry espouses as government policy. I therefore just want to hear what your views are on a protectionist policy in government of industry vis-a-vis the encouragement of young and nascent cottage industries in the country. Because big industries, yes, create jobs, but also the cottage industries probably create much more jobs than those big, very big mega industries. Just your views on that, CS nominee, and how you will harmonize both policy and legislation.
Jeanette, Lee will take several so that you can answer them together. Jeanette, you will skip posing.
Thank you, Chairman. Honorable Chairman, there's something notable about nominees from Nakuru which I want to bring to the attention of the nominee. We have vetted 3 people from, this is the 3rd person from Nakuru, Honorable Chairman. We are vetting in less than 2 years, or 2 years exactly. And at the moment we vet somebody, and I want the Honorable Kinyanjui to know this, when we finish vetting that person, we approve. Then 1 month down the line, if you ask who is the Minister for ICT, nobody remembered her. I'm telling you. Nobody even remembered whether there was a Minister of ICT. Then the first man who went to lunch, there was a problem. So, Honorable Kinyanjui, are you going to be part of the same? Was that a fate? But my question is, Honorable Kinyanjui, this idea of economic zones has been criticized by some critics and given a proposal which I want to know what is your thinking about it. They are saying, rather than having those economic zones in counties, that you as a minister now coming for industrialization, that you don't focus on that. What you do, you focus on economic niche of counties. Fund some budget for specific counties and develop that economic niche. And they give examples, like for example in Turkana, there's oil. So if there was money, you develop that economic niche for Turkana, we'll develop a country from that point, and it will actually contribute to our economy. West Pokot is mining. I can assure you that. There's a lot of minerals in West Pokot. So rather than doing these economic zones, why don't you find money and develop that economic niche? Tourism, Narok, and then also maize in, for example, Kitale. What do you think about people who think like that, rather than just having these white elephants, in my view, called economic zones without actual economy? Thank you, Chairman.
Honorable Lee, as a student of literature, you've always expressed that literature on your online platform, and most of it actually fairly has been, in the last few months, has been very critical on this administration. Number two, your party Ubuntu had its manifesto. Now you're joining, assuming this committee approves you, you will be joining the Kenya Kwanza government, which has also its manifesto. How do you want to use, how do you think you will work with this administration, considering that you've been extremely critical of this administration and its policies, and now you have to sit with the same team that you've criticized and used words against? Thank you.
Chairman, I don't have any question.
Okay.
I just want to assure Posing that the fears of Nakuru now will be sorted. I hope that the positive development...
Lee, you can proceed to answer questions. Posing is not being vetted here.
So thank you, Chair. Allow me to start with the Honorable Koech and to say that I have used my knowledge sometimes to be critical of the administration, but I also want to correct. There's a difference between being critical of policies and being critical of a government. If, for example, we say pending bills are affecting businesses, that is not an affront on a government. It is a plea from the business community to try and ease cash flows so that businesses don't fail. If we say taxation beyond a certain point can stifle growth, that is not criticism. It is actually positive criticism. So that if you take it, then everybody is a winner, from the government to the citizens and all that. And I think it's really important for us to also embrace that even when you're in office, including myself, it is not possible that I'm the only one with ideas. There'll be people from out there who will think I can do something better. And the right thing is to give them that avenue. And possibly, if they have better ideas than myself, also to listen to them. And I think, personally, I consider that as my role as a patriotic citizen. Whenever I see something that I think is not right, to raise it, and possibly hope that the policy makers, whether in Parliament or in the executive, can also take it up. With respect to a political party, it is true I have formally resigned from Ubuntu, but my heart is also very connected to the Ubuntu philosophy, which simply talks about I am because you are. And therefore also in government, whatever policies we make must not just be about me, myself, and I. There is a bigger community beyond yourself. And I think really this is what we need to really get out there. When you see poverty out there, it's not something we can ignore. And I think the opportunity to work in government also means my thoughts, I will share them to colleagues through Parliament, also to the President, and give the best advice that I consider necessary for the country. The Honorable Kosing, he has said that nominations from Nakuru, I am not aware. I still remember those two gentlemen. I'm not the appointing authority, and therefore would hate to discuss them in their absence.
Chairman, was it gentlemen?
A gentleman and a lady. You don't know your citizens in your former jurisdiction?
Gentleman and lady.
Yes.
And I think maybe also what is important is that even when a new person like myself comes, it's not a very good tradition to belittle anybody else who's been there before you. I think acknowledge whatever contribution they've made, whether big or small.
Actually, it was just a preamble to a question. Don't belabor that. Answer the
well said.
The relevant
With respect
question.
To the economic zones, I think every county has a story. If you go to Pokot, you know, I mean, the situation will be very different from Mombasa. If you go to Makueni compared to Nakuru, therefore, to make a generic template for all the counties may not be right. And I think, therefore, some of the considerations we need to make is to look at the economic opportunities existing at every place and ensuring that the economic zones we are creating are responsive to the needs of that particular place. For example, in the pastoralist areas, the issue of beef and cattle and lamb is really in huge demand, especially in the Middle East. So we don't need to go competing with other places that could do horticulture. So how can we empower areas like Isiolo and some of those places, Kajiado, Samburu, and the other places, so that they become our best practice examples when it comes to bee farming and these other things. So I think it is true that there's a need to rationalize, and I think more importantly also, is to, some of these counties are very close to each other. So sometimes to have sufficient raw materials to run all these economic zones may be a challenge in future. Therefore, they need to rationalize and also ensure that we prepare the public. The issue of it turning out to be white elephant is not particularly new in Kenya, where government invests millions and millions of shillings, and I've seen it even when I was in infrastructure. We are told at a certain point there are very many accidents. We go and budget for a footbridge, and nobody ever uses that footbridge, in spite of all the money being pumped there. So there's a need for us to educate the public, in this case, the investors, so that they know what is coming up, where there are challenges of funding. We can look for linkages with banks, including banks that are funded by government, to ensure that there's a close-knit loop. And I think that should be going on now, so that by the time these special economic zones are complete, then you have uptick. And I also want to say that sometimes you have these special economic zones. They are here, but the investments by the indigenous Kenyans has remained low. So we want to see locals also take advantage of these existing facilities. And lastly, to also confirm that in the past, we have had some of these allocations to companies or persons who are not serious to take up these opportunities. And therefore, they are purely there for speculation. Maybe it's an area within the allocation team that we must make sure that those who are given the opportunity indeed are ready to hit the road running. Lastly, the majority leader, the Honorable Ishongwa, talked about disharmony in government policy. And I don't think this is a light matter. Because on one hand, we've been trying to discourage imports. And I want to give the example of the import duty that had been slapped of about 1.5% on luxurious goods, some of those things that we didn't require. But it was removed. So on one side, we say we are protecting, but when you go to our supermarkets, 80% of the things come from outside, including toothpicks. So that is not consistent with a nation that says they want to industrialize. So I think there's a need both for government, the legislation, and also the national intelligence, because part of this legislation we pass has very serious impact on the nation's economic outlook. We are talking of a balance of payment deficit that is growing by the year. So for us to be able to overcome this, it will be extremely important that we harmonize our approach and ensure that everybody understands the implication of every single policy that we put and what it means to the larger national interest. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. I forgot to mention on cement, which I think is also a big issue. The President has pronounced himself on the issue of affordable housing. And it is obvious that affordable housing cannot be restricted only to the government projects. It also means that if I want to build myself a house, it is within the affordable agenda platform. But the cost of cement and steel has gone up by approximately around 30% in the last 2 years. And I think that can be attributed to some of the monopolistic regulations that were brought during the same period. And therefore, once vetted and finally approved, our first duty will be to try and get up a team to interrogate the impact of some of these policies and whether they are for the benefit of the country or they are reversal to the gains that we already had. The issue of cartels within the industry is also very important. And again, there has been mention of quality, and therefore KEBS and other regulatory agencies will be empowered to ensure that indeed we live up to our duty. Thank you.
Honorable Speaker, if you allow me, just one follow-up question in relation to that, the same question I'd asked. Because CS nominee, what I would really want to hear, 20 years ago, the Kenyan state was the leader in manufacturing in the region. As of 2023, statistics are showing us that Uganda has now overtaken Kenya. The contribution to our GDP of manufacturing in Uganda is, as of 2023, was at 15.65%. while Kenyans has stagnated at about 7.6% as of 2023. And 20 years ago, Ugandans, Tanzanians, Burundians, Rwandese, all the way to Congo, people are importing things from Kenya. What is it that you intend to do as a Minister for Trade and Industry to get us back to where we were at least 20 years ago, if not anything else? Because, and I agree with you, it is these protectionist policies that in a way are negating those gains. If you go to Uganda, it's not very big mega industries that are growing that contribution of manufacturing to GDP. It's small industries. But those are the small industries we are killing in Kenya. What will you specifically do to ensure that as you harmonize policies and legislation, you also encourage small cottage industries to grow in the country and take us back to that position where we were the leader in the region?
Thank you.
Yes, Amasa.
Thank you. Just to build on to what majority leader said, nominee, it's not just about aligning Kenya's trade and industrial policies to the legislation. It's also about aligning all that to sustainable development goals, because that is what will guarantee that we continue to industrialize, that these industries continue to thrive and grow and expand. So those specific initiatives or plans or action plans that we intend to undertake, I think that's what we want to hear from you.
And maybe to guide you, CS nominee, for instance, we are signatories, and I see you are a consultant with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. And having been a consultant, I don't know whether you still continue working as a consultant, but this African Continental Free Trade Agreement allows free access to markets of countries that have are signatories to this agreement, from Southern Africa, East and Central Africa. But then again, locally, we are signatories to that agreement, but then we have policies again that are negating the provisions of that agreement in terms of restricting the free entry of raw materials especially. And I have a case in mind of those two industries that I mentioned, clinker in cement and billets, steel billets. Because we pretend to be manufacturing those billets here and producing our own clinker, yet we are importing coal, and therefore probably the inputs that we need for production of that clinker becomes very expensive. And that's how you find that cement, the prices are almost 1.5 times as what they ought to be. And therefore, I don't know what you will do, but really it is something that needs someone who will be very bold to confront all the players and be able to have a very balanced program of how you balance those trade agreements, the growth of our cottage industries, and protection of big industry.
Lee will take the Deputy Speaker.
Yes, mine is brief, just as a follow-up question. The cost of clinker has significantly increased because there's been a big excise duty loaded onto imported clinker. So you've alluded to the cost of cement, and that is something that's been done in the last few years. So what are you going to do? Because the only way to bring down the cost of cement is not to load excessive excise duty on imported clinker. Because the clinker, we can't produce all the clinker in Kenya. I think 85% of the cement component is clinker. What are you going to do about it? Because that's the biggest challenge facing the building industry, and that's squarely in the hands of your ministry that you're nominated for.
Thank you, Daud.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to the nominee, he's been a former governor of Nakuru, and myself, I'm the patron for street families in Meru for the last 20 years. Can the nominee confirm, during his tenure as the governor for Nakuru, he picked up all the street families, street boys and girls, put them in a truck and went and threw them in a forest? That's an allegation which he would need to confirm. Secondly, I would want to ask the nominee, because he's going to, the manufacturing sector has remained stagnant for many years. It contributes 11% of the GDP. What measures would you take to promote the local manufacturing industry, because they are the backbone of this of country, in the sense that they can contribute more than what they have. The last one is domestic investors in the recent past have not given prominence as opposed to foreign investors, because foreign investors come, they get many incentives, tax incentives and other incentives, which are not available to our domestic investors. If you do get approved, how are you going to assist our domestic investors gain a foothold? Because they do not have a foothold in this trade in the country. Thank you, Chair.
Can you answer those?
Thank you, Chair. I wish to start with the Honorable Majority
as
Leader.
Chairman, not Chair.
Thank you. With respect
I'm sitting on a chair, and I'm the chairman.
It's been long. I stand corrected. Go ahead. I wanted to respond the issue of the contribution of industry to GDP has declined. But the truth also is that from independence to date, our economy has diversified. There are many things that were not there. For example, Kenya is among the top in geothermal in the world. Actually, in Africa, we are a case study. Sometimes when you're looking at industries, we don't see that as an industry. If you look at the flower export business, that's a whole industry unto itself. We are probably the fourth and the best in the whole of Africa. So sometimes when you're defining industry, we are defining it from the way we knew it then. But industry is very dynamic. Even the M-Pesa platform, it in itself is a whole industry, financial industry, that has completely reconfigured our economy. So I think as we move forward, and the banking industry, Kenya is not just an economy to itself. I mean, all these regional countries look up to Kenya. So I think sometimes when we say that our contribution has gone lower, it sometimes is taken to mean like we are stagnating. It is not entirely true. Actually, we are diversifying.
The members are talking about the prism of manufacturing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm also calling upon us to see manufacturing in the broader context.
Yeah, actually, I would like to comment about the manufacturing, and I want to echo what the Emir has said. Personally, I was doing manufacturing industry area. I was doing manufacturing of vehicles, and we had to close down. And if you go to industrial area today, you'll find that all the godowns are closed down. So I think it's good to accept that there's a problem, and then we sit down, we involve all the stakeholders, and then we see what we can do so that we can now open those industries.
Go on. That's a personal testimony.
Thank you, and I appreciate. So I think the point is, do we have a problem with the growth of industry? I said where we started in the year 1963 and the session of paper, and where we ought to be today, there is a clear challenge. The issue is how we can unlock that challenge. One of them, I said, was the cost of energy. The other issue is also getting into agreements that allow flooding of goods into the country, thereby disadvantaging our local people. The issue of taxation sometimes, without looking at the broader impact of that on the industry, becomes another bigger problem. I also wish to cite the issue of financing. If anybody wants to start an industry today and you go to a normal commercial bank, the period they give you is normally not more than 10 years. At an interest rate of 18%, you cannot survive. Again, we do not have banks that are aligned to industry, ones that appreciate the whole value chain of industry that can help our local manufacturers to work together. And therefore, I invite the members as we try and reconfigure how we can move from here forward and encouraging local investors,
those who are there to see how they can grow, and I think also more importantly, encouraging the younger ones. The majority leader also talked about the cottage industries. I think sometimes we overfocus on the big bulk industries. But the truth is, if you go to every village, the potential to have small industries that can employ 10, 20 people, get the raw materials from the village becomes a big issue, partly because of employment in the rural areas. And you do not want a situation where everybody has to leave their rural areas to come to town to find labor. So we'll also try and look at how we can be able to encourage cottage industries all the way down into the rural spaces. Then on the issue of sustainable industrial growth, I think it's also very important that we don't just seek to have industries that will come create jobs for 1, 2, 3 years, and then from there, they are gone. And I think looking at Kenya's position with respect to sustainability, especially on energy, we have a big step that we've already made. But I think there are critical decisions that need to be made with respect to energy that would help us to overcome. The Deputy Speaker has mentioned the issue of clinker and companies that have now to import clinker at a higher level, which means some of them are actually on the verge of closing. I think sometimes when some of this legislation comes, it would be wise to give the industry time. In which case you say, within the next 3 years, everybody should invest in clinker mining. So that if you're a local company and you know between now and then the duty will import duty will continuously go up by 5% or 10%, then it means you have to look for alternatives. And government can give them time. But some of these drastic decisions will send our local companies to the gallows. And if you look at the exports to our neighboring countries, without mentioning, cement is one of the big commodities that we are exporting, including steel. So when you come and also extinguish our companies here, we are also shooting ourselves within the regional export market. The Honorable Dawood has mentioned street children were rounded, don't know, taken somewhere. I think it is good to say that even if they are street children...
It was alleged.
Alleged.
You remember, Lee?
Yes, it was.
That in an attempt to make Nakuru attractive and make it a city, you picked street children, some street families, put them on the trucks and went and dumped them in Embobot Forest. That was it. I'm saying, let me finish. Because you remember this matter came up in the Senate?
Yes.
And Embobot Forest was said to be infested with hyenas and other dangerous wild animals, and some of those children were never found.
Mr. Speaker, it is extremely wrong.
I have used the word very advisedly, alleged.
I also have many allegations about everybody else. So if it's about allegations, I think we can also come up with allegations. But
I advise you not to lose your cool. Just answer questions.
It's about my integrity.
The way they are asked.
We also have allegations, if it's about allegations.
Just answer questions the way they're asked. That's what Dawood asked. And I was making it clear to you because you remember this matter was in the House of Senate for quite some time. So go ahead and answer. If it is not true, even no is an answer. If you lose your cool, you will be unable to answer the next questions.
I have faced worse situations, but I just wanted to say I have my conscience, right? I can never do that. And the unfortunate thing, including at the Senate is politicians who are there. And the people who are sponsoring it today, you know, I think let's also be fair. You can't call a governor to come and answer to allegations put by their opponent who have intentions to go to an elective position and then use that allegation later against him. If there are people, this country has the best intelligence in the region. We have never said even one name. You know, so I think let us also respect the institutions we work for. And I would say for Kenya and for posterity, the opportunity to serve in these institutions should not be personalized for gain. Because I was there, Mr. Speaker, throughout that period? How come only those people are known by politicians? Which family has ever come out? So I think it's good to be fair and also respect the positions we have. So in short, Bwana Dawood, that is an act of fiction.
Bwana Chairman, I don't have any interest in Nakuru. So I'm not a politician from Nakuru. It is alleged, that's what I said. We wanted a clarification. Governor should not feel offended.
Don't apologize. Lee, an opportunity like this.